Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tickernomics YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to be doing another scripting tutorial, and we're going to look at how to create custom charts in Tickernomics. So I've done a few videos now showing you how to create custom metrics. So now we're looking at something a little different, which is custom charts. And these can be very useful for a number of reasons. Let's say you want to look at the total industry revenue for a given industry that you're interested in, and you want to look at how that's evolved over time to see if that total industry is growing in revenue or if it's shrinking. Then one of the ways you can do that is by creating custom charts. Or let's say, as another example, you want to look at total capital expenditures made by oil and gas companies because you're interested in seeing how oil and gas companies have changed, how much they've invested into things like production, back into their businesses. You want to see how that's changed over time. The way you could do that is by creating these custom charts. So that's what we're going to show you how to do in this video. So the first step is to go to My Scripts here, and then in the bottom right here, click New, and we're going to create a new script. And I'm going to name this one. This is a similar script that I showcased in a recent video that I put on my main channel. We're going to call it TSX Tech Stocks Free Cash Flow by Free Cash Flow by quarter. So what this does is it sums up the total free cash flow generated by all tech companies on the Toronto Stock Exchange and shows you what that value is on a quarterly basis. And then as the category, I'll just put charts here. So like any script, it's going to start with function run and it's going to end with the end here. And by the way, I'm going to assume in this tutorial that you've seen some of the previous tutorials that I've released on that where I've talked about, just the basics of scripting and how to use certain, more simple functions. And this is going to be more of an intermediate level one. So if I'm talking about concepts in this tutorial that maybe you're not familiar with, then I'd recommend checking out some of the other videos that I've posted on this channel. I did post a beginner's one to kind of just teach people who don't have any sort of coding background how to get started with scripting. So if you watch that, then this video should make more sense. So we're trying to create a custom chart. And to do this, we have to create a number of for loops here. Now, the first thing we have to do is we're going to define this variable called days total, or you can call it total days, whatever you want to name it. And we're going to use a function in this called get total days. So we type in get total days and then put brackets at the end. And you know you've typed it incorrectly when it turns purple, and you can hover over it to see what this function actually does. And what it does is it gets the total accessible days within the system. So the system goes back to around 2011. So January 1st, let's call it, on 2011 would be day zero or day one, for example. And then as days, continue to progress, the number of total days in the system gets larger and larger by one every day. So the current days is, 7,000 or 8,000 or however many days it's been from now until about the beginning of 2011, because that's about as far back as our data in the system goes. So that's what get total days does. And because we're creating a chart, we're creating something that calculates, what a value of a metric is over a period of time, right? Because we're trying to calculate free cash flow on a quarterly basis going back to, let's say 2011, because we're creating a chart that's over a period of time. So that's why we have this, because we need to define how many days we want to go back first. And then we're going to start with our first for loop. So we're going to do for day equals, let's call it 360, or let's call it zero actually. So day equals zero. So the first day of the system, so this could be, January 1st of 2011. You don't have to call it day, by the way. You can call it, any other variable name you want, but because we are talking about days, let's, define our variables what they are. And then you can do a comma. And what we're doing here is we're defining how many iterations this for loop is going to have. So for day equals zero to days total, which is the total days in the system, and then we'll increment it by 30, let's say. So we're doing it about every month. So from day zero, January 1st, 2011, till whatever the current day is, at increments of 30 is when we're going to run this for loop, right? And this for loop, to actually define what it's going to do, we're going to do, so for, those amount of days at increments of 30, do this, right? And then we're going to have to, actually say what we want it to do. So we're going to define another variable, local sum equals 0. Now this sum is going to be the sum of the value that we're going to actually present on this chart. So at the start of this, it's going to be 0, but because we're incrementing it throughout this for loop, it's going to increment from 0 into larger values as we move on. So it just starts at 0, And then our next line is going to be local, and then ticker total equals get ticker count. Now, what this function does is it gets the total amount of tickers in the system and it retrieves them by an index. So an index is just a value that's been assigned to something. So each ticker or each company that we have in the system is assigned an index value. Like I think it's Apple is number one, Microsoft is two, Facebook is three. It's something like that. So we're iterating through every ticker, and because this chart that we're doing is designed to find TSX tech stock specifically, we're running through every company in the system by using this function. And then once we do that, we're going to have to figure out, okay, is this a tech stock? And if it is it a technology, or is it like a TSX tech stock, right? So we're going to get that later. So then we're going to have to introduce another for loop. So it's a for loop within a for loop to kind of perform that function. So we'll call this for I equals 0. So I, would be ticker 0. So we're iterating through all the tickers by index. So from 0 to 8,000, I believe, is the total amount of tickers or companies that we have in our system. So from 0 to ticker total, which ticker total again defines how many we have in our system, we're going to increment by 1 because we want to go through every company. So we don't want to, go through every other company which would happen if we put 2 here. We're just incrementing by 1. And then we'll write do here again. And then what we're going to do is local ticker equals get ticker by index. So this actually retrieves what the ticker is. And then we're going to do brackets. And in the brackets, we're going to do what we defined in the for loop that we're iterating through, which is I. So when I equals 0 to ticker total increments by 1. And we're getting the ticker by the index, which we've assigned that index to the variable I, which is what we did here, right? So that goes through all the tickers in the system, right? Now, the next thing we're going to have to do is actually define the conditions that we want the companies to have. So to do that, we'll do local sector equals get company prop str. So this is get the property of a company that's a string. Now a string in coding just means text. So we're getting properties of companies that are text, which if we think about what we're trying to do here, we're trying to get, the sector that a company belongs to because we want tech stocks, and also the exchange that they're on, which is, the Toronto Stock Exchange. So these are both string values that a company would have. For example, if I go to the companies list here, and then let's take a look at Nuvei, for example, because this is a TSX tech stock. We can go to the summary here, or actually I'll go to the details tab. And if we look here, for example, if we scroll down, this is in alphabetical order here. If we go to where the sector is, see the sector is technology right here. And then if we look at the exchange, it's going to say what exchange this company belongs to. So here's the exchange. And this one's on the NASDAQ, but it's because this company's cross-listed on the NASDAQ and also on the Toronto Stock Exchange. The other one would say TO here, which is our indicator for the TSX, basically. So sector is get company prop str, and then brackets, we want to do it for the ticker. And then we're going to do this for the sector. So we have to put this, because we're dealing with a string, you have to put it in quotations here. It's so we've defined, the variable ticker here equals, whatever index value that ticker is. So this is iterating through all the tickers within Tickernomics. And it's identifying if for that ticker, if it belongs to, which sector it belongs to and which exchange it belongs to. But first we actually need to define the sector and the exchange variables. Then we do the same thing with exchange here. So I'll just copy and paste this and then change property here to TO, which TO is TSX stocks. So now that we've done that, we have to define, we have to do an if statement so that as, it's running through this for loop, it recognizes only to perform the next task if the company belongs to the sector we want and the exchange we want. And to do that, we'll do, so if, and then in brackets, the sector has to be, and the way we would write this is the sector has to be, you do 2 equal signs, right? So sector equals equals, and then quotations, technology, and then the exchange, which you've defined before, same thing, equals equals, and then TO. And then we can close off the brackets there. And then we write then at the end. So if those conditions are met, then what do we do? Next step is local FCF. So we're actually defining the free cash flow variable. Free cash flow equals get XBRL. So this pulls the actual financial data for this ticker, which we've defined the ticker variable already. For the day, which we've defined the day already. So as this for loop iterates through all the days in the system, when we're defining what free cash flow is, we want this to be dynamic, right? And we want the free cash flow amount that it pulls to be whichever day it's looking at. So whichever day it's iterating through at that point in time. And we do the double quotes because the third argument here is segment, which we don't have segment data on the site just yet. So we'll just leave that blank for now. And then the metric we want, which is MMFCF, which is our metric for free cash flow on a quarterly basis. We close off the brackets, and then we basically will do this. So sum, or one condition that we should actually include here is if free cash flow does not equal 0, because we want to say exclude companies that have a free cash flow of 0. So for this, we'll write if free cash flow does not equal 0, which to do this, we have to do kind of a squiggly line here. So if free cash flow, this squiggly line with the equal sign, you can basically interpret that to mean does not equal something. So we can say if free cash flow, which we just defined FCF here, does not equal 0, then we do this here, which is going to be sum equals sum plus FCF, right? So we initially define sum to be 0, but then as this for loop iterates through, all the ticker symbols, sum is going to be sum plus free cash flow. So what this is doing is we've defined, the ticker, which is the ticker by index. This is what the sector is, what the exchange is, and then we're saying if the sector is technology and the exchange is the TSX, then calculate what free cash flow is by doing this get XBRL function, which calls the MMFCF metric. So it determines that value, which is free cash flow on a quarterly basis. And make sure, so if free cash flow is not 0, then sum equals sum plus free cash flow. So add the free cash flow to this date. So that's kind of how the chart gets populated. And then we're going to have to write a bunch of ends. So end is what you have to write to close out an if statement or close out a for loop. So we do end here, we do another end, and then we do a third end. So 3 ends because those close the 2 if statements we did, and then also one of the for loops. And then at this point, we're going to do a function called set prop by day. So this actually is what defines the chart. So this call here is what creates the chart. It's called set prop by day. We have to enter a few arguments here. So the first one is the string name, which is just what you want to title the chart. So we can call this TSX tech stocks free cash flow by quarter. So you can title it whatever you want, just make sure you put it in quotes. And then we do a comma for the next argument, which is going to be the day. So this is, it's like the y-axis or the x-axis of your chart, right? It's the day. So as time goes on, as it iterates through from day 0 back to the total days in the system, which that's going to change every day. So it's going to constantly update, and whenever you run this script, it's going to update for the most recent data. So day and then the sum, which is the actual value of the free cash flow, like the cumulative free cash flow value. And then we close it off in brackets. And once we've done all that, we're pretty much done. This is really what the code is. The one last housekeeping thing we have to do is all the way at the top, but below the function run, is we call this one other command called delete by day. So this is kind of a housekeeping one, and what this does is it checks to see if there is already a chart that was created by the name, which we'll define. There's only one argument for this command, which we're going to copy and paste this. So basically, if you already ran this chart and you want to run it again, like say, you want to see what updated data is, or you made some changes to it, then it's going to delete that chart if it exists. If it doesn't exist, then this command does nothing, but we have to make sure that we actually have it. So then we'll click save. And with all this, we should be pretty much good to go. The last thing we might want, actually, we need to do one more end because there's one more, the first for loop, we have to close that off as well, right? So we have all this now. And maybe one other thing we could add would be just a print statement at the end. So at the very end, before the last, end here, stating something like, go to Insight Charts to see chart. Because when you run this, it's going to generate the chart, and that's going to be visible in Insight Charts. So we want to say direct the user to the Insight Charts. So we'll save that. Now, one quick mistake that I want to correct myself, what I made when I was writing this, was when I was defining what the exchange was, I put TO, which for this, when I'm actually setting the property, you have to put exchange. So I have to spell out the word exchange because that's the property that we're looking for. And just for some background on this, if we open up the help tab, we'll look for the function called, if we type in this, we just come up, str. Yeah, so if we look at this, these are the actual company properties that are available. So there's, you can see the website, description, CEO, the sector, the exchange, the name, country, a whole bunch of stuff. So when you're doing this, you can pick any one of those and put them in the string prop name, so the second argument here. So I had to put exchange instead of TO because TO is the name of the exchange. But everything else looks good. So if we run this, then just take a couple seconds to run, and then when we open up Insight Charts, we should see our completed chart. So we'll open up Insight Charts now, and TSX Tech Stocks Free Cash Flow by Quarter is the name of our chart, and here it is. So that's what this data is now telling us. It's the sum of the free cash flow generated by all TSX Tech stocks going back to 2011, January 2011. So that's how you create a custom chart, and you can substitute, free cash flow for whatever metric, or you can remove any of these conditions. You can change the sector to calculate, whatever chart that you're interested in looking at. And what I'll do is I'll publish this. And I'll publish this, so any of you guys that are watching this and you want to actually get access to this code, just search for the name of this script, TSX Tech Stocks Free Cash Flow by Quarter. Just search for it in the public scripts menu, and then you can look at the code and you can adjust it however you want. So anyways, guys, that does it for this video. I hope this was useful for you. If you did find it useful, please leave a like and stay tuned for more scripting tutorial videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.